Prime Minister Mark Carney sits down with Canada's premiers in Huntsville this morning to talk about trade relations with the U.S.
We can be an economic powerhouse around the world. We have to unleash Canada, unleash Canadian industry.
We need to have an economy where companies know what's happening in 6 months and 12 months from now.
The Prime Minister's arrival on day 2 of the Premier's meeting in Huntsville comes at a pretty critical time, right, with the August 1st deadline to reach a trade deal with the U.S. just days away. For more on the talks, we're joined from Huntsville by Laura Stone with the Globe and Mail. Good morning to you, Laura.
Good morning, Lindsay.
So Premier spent day 1 of the meeting, or the summit really, talking about protecting Canada's economy from the impact of tariffs. What are the Premiers hoping to hear from the Prime Minister today?
Well, Lindsay, premiers are hoping for an update essentially on Canada's plan as to what happens if and when U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose 35% tariffs on August 1st. And so these would apply to goods that are outside of Canada and the U.S.'s free trade deal. So that would be only about 5% of goods that flow across the border, but it would still have a significant impact on a number of industries. I think there is split between a lot of the premiers as to how Canada should respond. We've heard from some, such as Danielle Smith there from Alberta and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, who have never really liked the counter-tariff reaction. They don't think that going toe-to-toe with the U.S. is the best approach, and I think it punishes Canadian industries. Premier Doug Ford, however, has always pushed for counter tariffs, and Canada has not done that so far on the increased steel and aluminum tariffs. So they're looking for really an update from the Prime Minister on the status of these trade negotiations, and Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc is also going to be attending the meeting. And then they want to know, look, what is our plan if the U.S. goes ahead with this, and how are we going to respond?
Do you think the public is going to get some insight on where these negotiations stand?
I sure hope so, because that's what the reporters are pushing for. Look, I mean, it is a negotiation. The federal government is tight-lipped at times as to what is going on and who they're talking to. And, you know, we've seen even as when negotiations are publicized, and we see at the G7 there when Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, came out and said, look, we've set a July 21st deadline about having this deal nailed down, and then the President writes a letter and says we're going to increase the tariffs, and the deadline's now August 1st. So even when these the details are publicized, we see the President just act unilaterally. But I think that there's an understanding, certainly from the federal government's point of view, that Canadians do want to understand this, and that industries are going to be severely impacted.
Today will be the first time Prime Minister Carney sits down with the Premier since Bill C-5 became law. The Prime Minister's office says the goal is to have Canada's new major projects office online by Labor Day. How critical will today's meeting be in determining what those first projects could be?
I think it's going to be very important. I don't expect, and a lot of the premiers I've spoken to don't expect that we're going to actually see the list unveiled today, but the premiers do want to understand, and they have a sense though of what projects they want to see on the table and what ones the government is going to put forward, but they do want to understand exactly how the process will work. And so I think it is critical, certainly from the provinces and territories perspective, who are all mostly on board, you know, in their own way with speeding up major infrastructure projects. But we've seen debate, of course, between some of the provinces like Alberta and BC, for instance, over the viability of a West Coast pipeline. And so we're going to hear this morning actually from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario on their plan to push a pipeline east. And so there is still some debate within the provinces as to which projects that they want to prioritize, that they want to see Ottawa prioritize. But there are still a lot of unanswered questions about exactly how this process will work. And of course, we heard yesterday as well from Indigenous leaders, and they want full participation in this process. They say they want to be economic partners and they want to be at the table, and they're calling for a First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister and the premiers for further discussions of how the Indigenous communities in Canada can be fully on board with this.
Laura Stone with the Globe and Mail, thanks so much for checking in.
Thanks, Lindsay.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.